How do you succeed as the lone SRE on a small team? I'll be answering this question based on my own learnings in working in small teams over the last 14 years. Let's dissect this question before we get started to make sure we're all on the same page. Small team. My career has been spent in the land of startups with the total engineering count of 5 to 50. And at this small size, sometimes you'll have multiple people who can share the SRE burden, but often there's at least one person, maybe you, who gets to be the atlas of the team, holding everything up on your shoulders. And this can be fun and exciting. It can come with unique challenges. But even in a large team, you still want to succeed, right? So what is success? No. A 15-minute talk is not enough to try and address that at a philosophical level, so I hope you already understand what success looks like. But be it money, professional advancement, personal growth, or even improved relationships with others, I think that one core component of this is ownership. But that's not anything special. Being responsible, completing your tasks, doing everything, and identifying these things and for yourself isn't anything new. So I want to take this, go a little bit more extreme, and suggest that success can come through extreme ownership. And this isn't my idea, nor is it my own term. I've lived this out in principle longer than the book has been around, but this phrase became popular by the 2015 book, Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win. Brief aside, I enjoyed reading the book, but it's very intense. The authors provide American war stories along with business stories, but they mostly put their focus in relating this to leadership, some of which can be applied to technical leadership and some of the things we do, but not everything is quite as relatable. But before I talk through that, we need to look and understand what extreme ownership means. So according to the book, extreme ownership says you are responsible for not just those tasks which you directly control, but for all those that affect whether or not your mission is successful. So the key part of this is to think more holistically and about your entire mission. Like, imagine your friend asks you to bring a dessert to a party in a few days. People will enjoy those famous chocolate chip cookies of yours, but let's think bigger. Take a step further and ask, is there a theme for the party? Then figure out what your mission is and how to make it succeed. If your mission is to grow in other areas of your life, then maybe just show up for dinner. Those cookies are going to be fine. But maybe your mission is to impress your friends. In that case, it turns out your friend is making their Sicilian grandmother's famous pasta, so you decide that making tiramisu would be worthwhile. But really, what is your mission as an SRE? As a site reliability engineer, as a systems reliability engineer? You don't have to go complicated here. It's to keep the system reliable, right? Like at the core, that's what we do. We don't typically talk about our mission, though. We talk about the direct effects we have on our systems, like maintenance tasks, or building scripts, automations, monitoring metrics and alarms, SLOs, all those kind of fun things. But I'm still not saying anything new. We all take regular ownership of these tasks, and taking extreme ownerships of these tasks, well, that looks like what any senior or staff level engineer does. These sort of tasks are so ingrained into our discussions here that we already recognize ways to try and own and improve them. But there's two more direct effects that SREs can have that are especially important for small teams, and that's sharing responsibility and simplifying complexity. When you are one of the few SREs, being able to share your responsibilities with others is critically important. This will maximize your time as it allows others to operate with virtual versions of you through what you've shared. But you can't expect everyone around you to know the systems at the same depth as you. And so this is where you need to simplify, either by standardizing the edge cases, creating abstractions or interfaces that can hide away some of these intricacies, and you might even need to replace custom solutions with more standard tooling. And these two ideas, they require a great deal of initiative on your part, or you could say an extreme level of ownership, because systems naturally grow in complexity, and people naturally don't want responsibility for the things that they don't understand. You'll have to work continuously and with great creativity to fight those natural processes. But like I said, there's still plenty about these direct effects. So I want to shift our focus away from them and over to reactive effects. Or basically asking, how do you react? So like after a scrum sprint, right? Or after a costly issue was fixed, does your team hold a retrospective meeting to look at what went right or wrong? If so, and if done correctly, you're already practicing a team-wide level of ownership focused on reaction and how y'all can improve for the future. But I want to shift the focus back on ourselves, back on the you specifically, because this is the core of extreme ownership, not just the team taking ownership of issues, but you specifically as a singular being. Even if you're not the lone SRE, even among a team, you still need to take responsibility for your own actions, and this is what I want to ask. How do you react? How do you react when your system has failed? When someone asks you questions about your system? When someone can't understand your system? Do you get angry? Do you get defensive? Do you start to blame others? Because this is where ownership gets extreme. Because the focus shifts away from what we naturally point to, others, and onto ourselves. So, if your system has failed, you failed to protect the system. Let's say your script breaks because someone forgot a flag. Don't say, oh, you should have known better. Ask yourself, can I add a protection in the code? Could I have improved the documentation to make this less likely? And this is hard, right? This is hard because it requires you to drop your ego. And this is hard because it requires you to admit to imperfection. But wait, if you're feeling argumentative about this, or maybe one of my later examples, if you feel like what I said isn't fair or is missing nuance, then please relax your ego. Or maybe you need help working on some boundaries. Once you let go of your ego, then your pride or self-importance, whatever you want to call it, you will produce better results and build better relationships with your colleagues. You'll find it easier to listen and easier to think objectively about your own technical system when you aren't worried about protecting yourself at the cost of others. But I do need to point out that some level of self-protection is a natural response for anyone who's come from a past of being taken advantage of. Working with your manager, a trusted friend, or even a professional therapist or psychologist can help you sort out what sort of reaction is going on here, depending on how difficult you find this to be. Anyway, let's get back to more of those reactive questions. Like, if someone has questions about your system, then you failed to communicate how it works. Maybe you missed a chance to train them. Does something need to be renamed in the code? Maybe you missed a chance to document it. Maybe now's a really good opportunity to go and write that documentation, or maybe even ask somebody else to help you write it. And if someone can't understand your system, you made the system too complex. At the very least, don't insult the engineer by telling them that they're too stupid to understand your system. But equally important, and something I've been guilty of myself, is not to brag on the complexity of your creation. Oh yeah, it's really special how I added those 3 levels of cache in there. No, take a moment and see what it is through their eyes, an overly complicated mess. Again, you have to have some level of humility here and be willing to ask, did I need to put in those 3 levels of cache there? Are they really working like I thought they were going to? And it's all well and good to ask ourselves these questions, but I want to make sure that we don't take everything and make it extreme. So let's regulate it here, and so that you know what you should and shouldn't be extreme about. So, problems. Once you've finally embraced a lifestyle of extreme ownership, we could say that it would be extreme for all your problems to go away. And they will, right? No, they're not going to. So we're not going to be extreme in that regard. We'll be extreme in our drive to avoiding repeat problems. I mentioned that script breaking a minute ago. And if it fails once, your natural inclination is just to chalk it up to a fluke, right? But if it keeps on tripping alarms, then you notice and increase the priority of fixing it. And how are you going to feel about the intern pointing out that problem in your script? Extremely angry? Extremely annoyed? No, you must not be a know-it-all. You must have the humility to learn from everything and everyone. But then Mr. Sassy has no patience, but is still, for some reason, highly regarded anyway on your team. He comes along and demands that you fix the bug right now. So, do you work overtime to fix it? No. Maybe don't tell them to shove off like you really want to, but do tell them where your boundaries are. Maybe your boundaries look like, hey, yeah, I agree it's a painful bug, but I'm going to be getting off soon today, and my manager has me committed to this project. Or, hey, I could get to that next sprint when we have time. Or maybe you even tell them, if I remember correctly, that script, it just needs like an if statement in there. Could you go and do that and test it? I don't have time and capacity to test it, but if you do, that would be great, and I'd love to review it. So let's walk through a few more examples. Let's say someone puts an incorrect combination of arguments into your tool and the system crashes. Do you say, well, if you had just read the docs, then this wouldn't have happened? Or, hey, actually, we could probably put a linter rule that prevents you from hurting yourself here. Or maybe later, you get invited to a meeting about database migrations. Do you say, why am I wasting my time with another meeting? Or, hey, I looked over the agenda, and it looks like you're inviting me to talk about migrations. Did you know that we have a document covering how to build those and run those here? Or later, the new guy asks you how to store a file, and if that's what S3 is for. Do you say, yeah, it's named Simple Storage Service. Go up and read on it. It's not that hard. Or do you say, yeah, that's right. Let me set up some time to meet tomorrow so we can cover how it gets used here in the company. In the meantime, here's a doc that you might find helpful to read until then. Or maybe finally, your boss walks by and says, hey, I hate logging into that new metrics tool. Can you go and run the report that I need again this week? Maybe you say, okay, yeah, sure, I could, but hey, what makes it so difficult for you to run it? We bought that tool because you were excited about how effortless it made it to run those reports. And then they say, oh yeah, that was before I knew it was going to make me use a longer and more complicated password than I use for anything else. I can never remember what it is. And that's when I learned that a C-level leader in the company had been using the same one password for every account, and it consisted of a single word and a single digit. I taught them to use a real password manager. We covered several things from our talk today. I want to drill them in. Extreme ownership is to own everything related to the success of your mission. For a small team, make sharing and simplifying an important part of your work. Be humble, learn from mistakes, learn from others, and communicate boundaries. Thank you.